The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. No, my hi to my. This is Gone By Lunchtime, otherwise known as the New Zealand edition of What the Fuck Just Happened Today. Special thanks goes out to Simplicity, who are a KiwiSaver provider, who are now our sponsor. And I'm not a financial advisor, but they sound pretty great to me. Have a look at the bottom of any of the politics posts and follow the links. And before you know it, everything will be better in your life. Before we get going, Annabelle Lee, you've got a plea to New Zealand.
Yeah, just to our politicians, really. Just from henceforth, if you could not do anything drastic in the 3 hours prior to our record of Gone By Lunchtime, that would be really helpful, because it's really hard to keep up, especially if you already have a full-time job where you're having to have a lot of hui and then quickly catch up, hui, catch up,
So
hui,
it's
catch
2 p.m. on
Everybody
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Just
And
cut
we'll
it
just
out.
stop, you know.
Just down tools, everyone go
just
have a
break.
cup of tea
Go
and
and
a
have a
lie down.
drink.
Take a breather. It's not that important.
Yeah.
nap.
It's only politics.
How are you, Ben Thomas?
Well, great. The campaign has come alive.
Can we just get before we kind of burst into all that? We also wanted to acknowledge that Ben Thomas, who works for Exceltium, is doing a little bit of work for a party. I've got it written down here. It's the ACT Party.
I'm doing a little bit of work for ACT before the election.
So just so that's out there on the table, he will not be talking about ACT, but probably we were not going to talk about ACT anyway, are we? Because they're on 0 point fuck all in the polls. They don't even have the ACT on their billboards in Epsom. That's where we're at with it. So do you have anything to say about that, Annabelle? Because Ben can't say anything.
No, I don't have anything to
Good
say.
luck, David Seymour. Once ran over a cat.
That was a fantastic profile piece.
We
That was in the spin-off.
somewhere in the depths of history in the spin-off.
Yeah.
A year or two ago. What is going on though? What is going on? My goodness me, Ben, can you give us the latest that you've seen from scrolling through your various social feeds and news headlines with the Greens?
So, where we thought we would be about 8 days ago is the Greens poised to become the second largest party in Parliament, the natural party of opposition.
Maybe
to overtake the dying Labour Party, and come in with their strongest election result yet by consolidating the left behind them. Instead, I think it would be fair to say that the Greens currently face an existential crisis, and not one of those fun first-year philosophy ones that you talk about in pubs, more in the sense of they may not exist in 7 weeks' time.
People were saying this about the Labour Party not so long ago, so maybe, I don't know whether this is a permanent existential crisis or a... James Shaw, the co-leader of the Labour Party last night, Annabelle, was trying to...
Co-leader of the Labour Party?
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Well, there's a prediction for you, politics fans. The co-leader of the Green Party was saying that it was other parties have sailed through bigger controversies, but it's obviously a big deal. Just to recap very briefly upon what has happened to most recently to the Green Party, which is that 2 of its sort of, I suppose, old guard MPs, Kennedy Graham and Dave Clendon, went yesterday on Monday to the Green leadership with an ultimatum, which was Meterea Ture, needed to stand down from the co-leadership of the Green Party, despite the fact that she had already withdrawn from any aspiration to a cabinet post, were they to have been in government after the election. That wasn't enough, they said. No, they wanted her to go, and if she weren't to go, then they were going to quit. Turned out she wasn't willing to go, and that the caucus was behind her rather than behind them. And then as of caucus this morning, I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, they have stood down from caucus and won't be on the list on the election on September 23. I've forgotten what my question was to you after all that, Annabelle.
Just the vibe.
The vibe. Can you please give us a sense of the vibe?
It's a sad way for those two to end their parliamentary careers, isn't it? Because I think they've been there 9 years each. So, you know, Green Party stalwarts and men of principle. Unfortunately, I think the way they've gone about it has left them open to criticism, including their decision to stay in Parliament until the election. I think that if you had the courage of your convictions and you felt strongly about this issue, that you would probably resign forthwith. Otherwise, you leave yourself open to criticism that that you're not, you know, you're critical of it, but you're not prepared to give up your parliamentary salary that's generated by Green support to do so.
Do you think it was an act of sabotage? I mean, there was a lot of kind of anger on the part of both young Greens and also at least one staffer who was talking about it being an act of disgruntlement, sort of painting it as an act of revenge almost for having been bumped down the list, having refused to stand down from the list. She claimed, and they've denied.
I would be surprised if this is motivated by their demotion. However, I think that it's taken them 3 weeks or so to reach this conclusion isn't very helpful either, because in the press release that I saw, they said that they didn't think it was appropriate for anyone to lie to a public organisation such as WINS or IRD. If it had been the vote, the electoral fraud that had broken the camel's back, that I would understand. But the revelation about her welfare fraud or misleading WINS is not a new revelation. So why it's taken 3 weeks and why you would pull the pin on a week where you would expect in the news cycle for things to start quietening down for the Greens seems a very unusual thing to do, and obviously very, very damaging for the party, because I think their strength through this has been that they've presented a united front, and I think that's enhanced Metedia's mana and credibility and their own, in terms of this being very much around a discourse of, you know, how we treat beneficiaries. So I think they've sabotaged that somewhat.
It's a good point, isn't it, Ben, in that it looked at first glance that I thought it to be a bit of a cock-up on the part of the Green Party's strategic management, that they hadn't got full buy-in from every member of the caucus, remembering that every member of the caucus only means 14 human beings, that they had before Metelia made the decision. The decision was made for her to do that kind of confessional at the AGM. Turned out, Kennedy Graham said in his interview with Jane Patterson on RNZ that they had been in with that, but the way it had unravelled since, and that they weren't into it, which is a little odd, because they think she's now not fit to lead a party, but they were apparently in behind that decision.
I don't think there's any inconsistency there at all. What you've first got to look at is, you know, ruling out what the Greens campaign manager Sarah Helm said, which is that they're disgruntled that they were bumped down the list during the ranking process by members. Kennedy Graham was number 8.
But he had been asked to stand aside, hadn't he?
Well, he disputes that.
He disputes that.
So he was at number 8. By any kind of polling that the Greens have had in the last 6 to 9 years, he would be back as an MP without any kinds of problems. Where there is uncertainty about whether if he was going to be disgruntled about being ranked at number 8, that would only be the result of very changed circumstances. And in fact, we are living in a very different world for the Greens right now and in the last week than they were 2.5 weeks ago when Metedia first made the announcement and her confession about the welfare fraud, about the accommodation supplement. So what happened last week was On Thursday, two new things came to light. First of all, polling showing that actually I think it was a majority of Greens supporters didn't agree with Materia's her confession.
This was the News Hub poll. Slightly tendentiously worded question, but sure.
Look, but enough to throw a bit of doubt there. But more importantly, new details came to light, which ostensibly suggested that one of the addresses that Materia Ture was registered at on the electoral roll while she was on the DPB, while she was admittedly taking an accommodation supplement that she wasn't entitled to because she was lying about her flatmates, was actually a home owned by and lived in by the father of her child. Now, that would have disqualified her from the DPB entirely and would have meant that the fraud was actually greater than we previously suspected. Her excuse or defence for that was that she didn't actually live there. She was lying and was committing electoral fraud in order to be able to vote for one of her friends. Now, whatever you think of her original story and also the new story that she's given, and if you believe that new version of events, you can recognise that narrative has shifted substantially from the deprived sole parent who was struggling to feed her kids and scrambling for survival, and it changed. And the other thing that changed was the Labour Party leadership and probably the Greens' level of polling support around there. I'm not sure what the Greens' polling regularity is. But I don't think it's right to say that because they agreed to this truncated or edited version of her story 2.5 weeks ago, that they can't then come to the conclusion that she's not the right person to lead them into the election and form a government. I mean, timing is everything in politics. Jacinda Ardern did an interview about her, she was confronted by her lack of achievements in her 9 years in Parliament, and she said, the timing has been bad. She's been in opposition. Well, the timing is very bad for Materia Ture right now.
We'll get on to the Jacinda Ardern question in a moment, but to Ben's point, Annabelle, about the way the story has shifted and expanded a bit in terms of Materia Ture's admission, has it unravelled? I mean, there is a sense, isn't there, that while there were many people who wouldn't care to stand in judgment of the story about someone's experience when they were trying to make ends meet on a benefit, studying, solo parent, once it starts expanding into questions of, however piffling the offence might be, a breach of electoral law, in effect, then it starts to somehow look more damaging, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I've never met a mum on the DPB who lived a life of luxury and who wasn't struggling to feed their children, and likewise students also struggle. Being a student and on the DPB, I imagine, despite who your mother-in-law or ex-mother-in-law might be, is always going to be a struggle. I think the Greens took a political risk, and it was one worth taking, but I think they ballsed up their strategy in that when you open the door to the media, when you make a confession like this, you really have to open up the door the whole way and let everything out and front everything. If you just open it halfway, then your political editors are going to boot in the door and get the rest. So I think, in retrospect, it would have been wise for Materia to front foot this by meeting with Wins first, by getting an exact amount of how much she had to repay and to start repaying it. And she may have forgotten about the electoral fraud. It's hardly the crime of the century, in my opinion. To be honest, I think most New Zealanders are more offended by MPs who stand for electorates and receive a salary representing electorates that they don't live in. But it's still electoral fraud. I think if she had front-footed all of that stuff first and got it all out in the open and be seen to be proactively dealing with it, paying for it, letting it all out there, that would have been a much wiser strategy than the situation that we've had over the last couple of weeks of little bits of information dripping out and causing more damage. So I think it was a risk that could have been managed a lot better, but unfortunately it seems like the cart has been put before the horse, and it has caused some damage. But likewise, there's a number of people on the left who feel that it's a great thing that it's opened up a conversation that New Zealanders haven't been willing to have. And if you look at the media and the coverage, you have to say that they've perfectly justified her argument that beneficiaries are vilified in this country, and that's what we've seen in terms of the media narrative around her.
The whole media narrative, you think, or some commentaries?
I think most of it has been pretty negative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look, there isn't a sense in which Matiria is the author of her own misfortune. In terms of presentationally, I thought the way that she confessed originally was very good and very effective. And I, along with some other commentators, totally wrongly predicted this was a masterstroke of genius. Further disclaimer, I got that real wrong. This idea that. This idea that she, I think, what did she say? Being subject to these benefit rules makes you a liar and makes you break the rules. And there was this, this kind of feeling of, just the kind of dehumanizing effect of the system. And I thought that came across really well. Since then, she's basically been defiant and acted with what comes across, I think, is quite a sense of entitlement about everything she's subsequently done and everything that's subsequently come to light. Having fun standing for the Milligallicati Serious Party. And there was an astounding picture that Radio New Zealand tweeted of their stand-up with James Shaw, who for some reason has been pushed in to front this rather than Matiria Tudor.
She was in Dunedin last night, to be fair, but yeah. Sure. And the United Caucus is standing behind her very symbolically, sort of their backs up against the wall of the Bowen House lifts in Lambton Quay, surrounded by media, and the only person smiling is Matiria Tudor. Oh, I see. Right.
So those are some of the things that I think is interesting, like having fun with McGillicuddy Serious. Like, are people on the DPB not allowed to have fun or not allowed to stand for politics? Would we be as upset if she played netball? I'm not sure. Look, and the other narrative has been that she has advocated breaking the law. That's not been my read of it. My read is that what she's saying is that people do break the law. It's not a good thing. It's not something that they're proud of. But people who are desperate do desperate things, and we need to look at changing the law. Rather than telling everybody to go out and break the law. But hey, this is a party founded on legalised marijuana, so, obeying the law isn't necessarily a big part of their playbook anyway.
It set off a lot of things in motion, that AGM speech, one of which was a surge initially in the polls for the Greens, who in one of the polls, I think it was the News Hub Read poll, they went as high as 15%. But... No, was that the One News Coleman? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It feels like ancient history now. Several years ago, it was a couple of weeks. That led probably almost directly to Labour's slump, which in turn led to Andrew Little talking about quitting, which in turn led to a very fast and efficient defenestration and Jacinda Ardern being promoted to the leader, which in turn led to the Greens being drained of some of their vote again. I don't know, it's hard to keep up. We'll get on to Jacinda Manhire in a moment, but I want to ask first what you guys think it does to the Green vote. There's been whispers about them sort of falling down into the single digits. Do Labour soak up all of their votes and in the end are Labour fine, or does this play into National's critique of the Labour-Green bloc being a circus and they lose on aggregate overall? This is a foolish game to guess, but guess.
About 10 days ago, I incorrectly predicted that Labour's challenge in the election was to avoid falling off a cliff face. I think right now the Greens' challenge is to like avoid falling into some kind of pit into the centre of the earth. They will have immediately lost that post AGM bump that they got as soon as Jacinda Ardern became the leader of Labour. The next step was to claw back all of those Greens votes that Labour had lost since 2008, back when they were polling in the mid-30s. I think that would have come pretty swiftly last week. I think they will really struggle to be more than a 6 or 7% party after the election, and if they can't sort out their internal problems, they may not make 5%.
Things have been moving fast, though. I mean, there will be a base of Green voters who will feel that Metiria Ture has been, if not martyred, done a very brave thing in terms of taking the hits and having to forego a genuine ambition of hers, which was to have the social development portfolio. Maybe it won't be so bad, Annabelle. Do you think that it's going to hit them hard in the polls?
I would be surprised if the next poll has seen them grow that 15% or hold on to it. I imagine they will take some sort of hit. I spoke to someone today who I thought would be sympathetic towards Metiria's plight, and they said to me, the thing is that when it comes to the ballot box is tapu. So I think, interestingly, the electoral fraud may hurt her in some quarters. I think in terms of the left-right bloc, I don't see a whole lot of disgruntled Green voters going over to ACT or National. So I don't think it will hurt the left-right bloc. But I do think that we'll see some of the Green support bleed back over to Labour.
What's your take, Ben? My suspicion is that there were some people who, the kind of soft key fans, who would have been drifting back towards Jacinda Ardern. I mean, I feel like they're some of the people I've been talking to at school drop-off in my Auckland suburban life. But they will now be getting battered with the message that the left on the whole is actually in disarray. And I reckon that they might stick with National. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen over the last week and a half that National doesn't have any clue how to attack Jacinda or try and undermine her. This Greens opening is manna from heaven for them because they can go back to, the sinking rowboat in all directions and talking about the lines they've been using have been chaos on the left, shambles on the left. And they're not wrong, basically a deadweight co-leader for the Greens, who's essentially a dead conjoined twin attached to James Shaw that he's got to kind of lug around now. And who can't take part in the next government, who is a sitting duck for invasive and difficult media questions, and we've seen Jacinda Ardern has been just basically in the nicest Jacinda comforting, caring, reassuring way, absolutely cutting them loose in every one of her media appearances.
Yeah, refusing to engage in those questions.
And of course, the extraordinarily brutal assassination of Metiria Ture's ministerial career on Friday.
I don't think that it's necessarily that bad I think if this had happened under Andrew, this would be catastrophic for Labour. I'm not convinced that it's that bad a thing for Labour under Jacinda, and it's actually now given her a platform to say, and she has, if you want steady leadership, I can provide strong, firm but reasonable steady leadership. Throw your vote my way. So I think in some ways this is actually going to be quite helpful for Jacinda and not necessarily...
I actually agree. I think now that once the Greens are back established as a minor party rather than a competitor to Labour, I think that actually helps the perception of stability on the left a lot.
Let's rewind a little into the distant mists of the past, by which I mean last Tuesday, when Jacinda Ardern became the leader of the Labour Party, and now seems like she's been there for some time. But people have been talking Jacinda mania. People have been getting very excited, perhaps some too excited. There has been pom-poms distributed in panic by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of all people. But it was an amazing week, and it seemed to me there were sort of three moments you could probably identify out of it. The first one was that press conference which was unanimously lauded, and I think rightly. I don't think anyone could do anything but look at that press conference and go, wow, she had them. She was sort of strong, direct, and funny, you know? I mean, I because I'm cool, I watched the press conference again and actually noted down the number of laughs in it. There were 14 times the press gallery laughed. Awesome. She addressed them by the journalist by name 9 times in that short press conference. And I think one of its advantages for her probably was that they didn't really have much time to think about it. You know what it's like. You just kind of have to get up there and do it. They had. I asked Jacinda Ardern when I saw her in the TV3 green room how long they had, and they had sort of less than an hour to prep for that press conference.
Did you see that?
And they just went boom, you know, and out it comes. And you either sink or swim, and she swam.
Did you see that amazing Mikey Sherman piece on 7 Sharp?
No, but I heard about it. Did you tell me about that?
I'm a huge Mikey fan.
She's a great
journalist. Apparently they're in politics on 7 Sharp. Someone was telling me.
Kitty Allen was telling us when we were at TV3 the other day.
Yeah. Where they cranked up the mics at the press conference so that they could pick up Grant Robertson instructing Jacinda from behind her,
delivering a line,
giving her lines, which I think she almost uniformly ignored. But but it was amazing.
Right.
I've never seen
Mikey Sherman is quality, right?
She's the business.
7 Sharp is back. 7 Sharp is on.
Mm-hmm.
Top politics journal.
She should be anchoring it with that lovely Tony Street.
She should be anchoring it.
And then the second thing in the week, by my reckoning, was indeed a television moment, and it was the AM show and the Mark Richardson thing. And it was when she pointed her finger and said, you. And there was a little kind of visceral moment there, and it looked like a bit of anger, and it was articulate, but it wasn't really about her. It was about a general point of principle. And I think and it ended up getting headlines around the world, and New Zealanders love headlines around the world. I mean, you know, it was everywhere, right? And so that seemed like a really big human moment in a weird way. And then the third thing was the kind of, if you like, Machiavellian or the kind of political operator point, which you've alluded to already, Ben, which was
the gangland killing.
The gangland killing, where a message was sent via Grant Robertson. It sounds like.
I think it was the chief of staff. They said that they did it under the memorandum of understanding, so it would have been the chief of staff.
Whoever it was, someone was dispatched down the corridor to tell the Greens that Metiria Ture would not be having a role in a future Ardern-led cabinet. Of course, James Shaw, and then shortly, and then Metiria gave a press conference saying she'd decided not to seek his spot. And James Shaw said subsequently that they were going to do that anyway. Who knows? Who cares? In a way, it showed. I mean, it showed a sort of decisiveness. You can say ruthlessness if you like, whatever. And though it felt like to me like of the week, those 3 moments sort of sprinkled out with a whole bunch of pretty strong media appearances. Gave a kind of, I mean, flawless is overdoing it, but you could not have hoped for a better debut week, could you, Annabelle?
No. It was an impressive 4 week. It was an impressive week, and if she manages to maintain that momentum, that vigour and assertiveness with charm throughout the campaign, then she will most certainly be a force to be reckoned with.
You had her on your show, The Hui, which screens on Sunday mornings on Television 3. How did she strike you in terms of her off-camera demeanour? Was she surrounded by advisors? She was there with Kelvin Davis, her new deputy. What was the
She was there with Kelvin Davis and Jodie E. Hacker. The vibe was relaxed and very optimistic, which is something
relentlessly optimistic.
Relentlessly optimistic, which is, to be honest, not something we see a lot of in our green room when we're interviewing politicians. But no. They are genuinely on cloud 9 at the moment, those two, aren't they?
Relentlessly optimistic, Ben. Can that last, or does that sort of start becoming a bit grating after a little while?
It's only got to last 7 more weeks.
Yeah, if that.
6 more.
6.5.
Hey, John Key managed to do it for a whole 9 years.
Right.
Yeah, we still don't know what the cusp of the special thing we were on ever was.
Maybe it was Jacinda Ardern. Maybe that was it.
You can write these things out
she could
for a long
announce that
time.
it was me. It was me.
I mean, the way that she dealt with today was Clark-like or John Key-like, just in its ruthless efficiency. You get the feeling that previous Labour leaders of the last 8 years would have, gone down the hall for a chat, wanted to talk about this. Jacinda just dispatched a messenger to let Today know that her ministerial career was never going to start, and then made sure that the media knew about that. And today was on Morning Report, really disowning the Greens, absolutely pushing them away from where Labour was in terms of their campaigning, and still sounding like, the nicest, most approachable, friendly person in politics.
She seemed to sort of downgrade the memorandum of understanding a bit. If I recall correctly, she said to Morning Report...
Put it on the Morning Report desk and then put her coffee on top of it, yeah.
She said that, the memorandum of understanding, all that is just an agreement if... we're in a position to form a government that we'll look into it. That's what she seemed to be saying. And of course, the memorandum of understanding is more than that. It's an agreement to work together. It's an agreement to alert each other about policy development.
No surprises.
And no surprises. Yes, it comes to an end on election day. And there was always that risk, which is greater than ever now, that Labour, if strong enough, could go with New Zealand First in a repeat of what year was it? Was it 2005?
2005. Where
the Greens were all ready to join up and got flushed at the last minute. But the issue, I suppose, I wonder about with Jacinda Ardern, with the Greens, she's mostly said, I'm not going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about us. And she's also said things like, I don't think I'll talk about that, that would be unhelpful. And for now, people are kind of like, oh, okay, fair answer. But that's not a fair answer at all. Whether things are helpful for you or not is neither here nor there. And the kind of lines she's trying to draw about which questions she answers and which ones she doesn't will, I think, start to be tested a bit more, won't they, as we go on?
They will. People have been testing Winston Peters for the past 21 years about what his plans for post-election coalitions, and he hasn't given any ground over his 2 decades. So I think that Jacinda's on totally with the right track. She's putting out the messages that she wants to. She's talking about what she wants to talk about. I still don't think you can fault anything in her performance to date.
That's probably something that Andrew wasn't as good as, getting drawn into discussions or arguments that you don't want to have. That so far she's handled quite masterfully, keyish in fact.
And it's something the current Prime Minister, we saw earlier in the year, did get drawn down those blind alleys of talking about superannuation when he didn't want to, and having to make sort of policy announcements seemingly off the cuff. So it's a real skill, and it shows that they've got a pretty serious leader right now.
It's interesting, I was listening to some of her answers on the sort of 7,000 or 8,000 programs she's been on in the last few days, and some of them, it's interesting to do a kind of experiment in your head and imagine Andrew Little saying exactly the same words, and it's plausible, most of the answers, that he would say exactly the same words, and they would sound so different. They would sound soporific. They would sound evasive, So
there's this nonsense idea that National are trying to put about that the leader doesn't matter.
There was a line by Stephen Joyce, who ran campaigns under the banner Team Key. And then Bill English said it's not about personality, while posing for a selfie putting pineapple on his pizza.
Yeah, of course leadership matters. Labour had billions of dollars worth of social spending for poor people, for old people, for families, that they were getting no traction or cut through on because, for instance, Matiria had a personal story that she could relay to audiences. Jacinda bleeds empathy. And she's cultivated that brand extremely well. She has the highest EQ of any politician in the New Zealand Parliament, since John Key at the very least. And it really does change the whole game.
So what does it mean in terms of Matiria's leadership if she can't be a minister? Can you lead from the back like that?
The notion that Shaw has put about is that she could be they were thinking anyway of having one of the. I think it's true actually, but it does sound a stretch that they were thinking one co-leader could be the person who was the link to the backbench, and the link there to the grassroots beyond that.
Well, Marama Fox is not a minister, and she's a multi-party co-leader.
But they're a two-person party, to be fair, aren't they? Like, they're not a formal coalition partner. You would expect both. But the reality, I would have thought. I mean, whether or not she's got the energy to stay there at all, I would be surprised. I mean, when I say energy, I don't mean in terms of the kind of capability. It's more just the. She was clearly thinking about quitting before Russell Norman did. She went on that long sabbatical after that as well, and who could blame her for it? She was pondering her future, whether or not, having had this goal she's had swept away from her, whether she really wants to stay on. I don't know. I'd be surprised if they're not in government. You'd assume that she was be there for maybe a consolidation period and then move on.
I mean, we were talking about the importance of timing, and for the life of me, I can't understand why the Greens haven't looked at the example of a week ago and seen how quickly you can turn around a bad situation.
Is this where you do your Chloe Swarbrick booster?
This is absolutely the beginning of my Chloe Swarbrick for leader pitch.
Hey Modi order. Should we just take a rest? You can do your Chloe.
Go, do Chloe.
It's been all over social media.
If
shilling for Chloe.
If you look at the immediate reaction to Jacinda becoming the Labour leader, the kind of zeitgeisty uptake of these "let's do it," the campaign of our lives kind of slogans, and what you were talking about before, the fact that Jacinda is funny, she's a bit sort of post-internet. You would think that there would never be a better climate heading into a very difficult campaign for the Greens in their current state, where they're already looking at, I would think being about between 6 and 8%, to get in, basically ride that slipstream. Photo ops with Jacinda and Chloe Swarbrick at public events versus Matidia sort of hiding out behind James Shaw and Jacinda sort of, staying in the car.
What ministerial portfolio would you give her, Ben?
Interestingly enough, I have thought about that. I would have thought arts, culture and heritage would be a good pick for her. Some of the work that she was doing on what you might call the Auckland cultural ecology during the Merrill campaign was pretty interesting.
He's put a lot of thought into this.
Yep. It's like this is the mood is sweeping Kingsland and surrounding suburbs.
It's a rising movement, and you heard it here first.
Annabelle, can I ask you about Kelvin Davis, who we haven't mentioned yet? But it's a package deal with Jacinda Ardern and Kelvin Davis, and sometimes I think we overstate the importance of deputies. Mostly people don't care, but we do have a battle now: Bill English plus Paula Bennett versus Jacinda Ardern plus Kelvin Davis, and his impact is partly his personality overall. He's got this sort of a kind of silver fox stubbornness, staunchness thing going on, but also what he does as someone standing in Te Tai Tokoro in a Māori seat. He could shift the balance a bit or the dynamic a bit in those Māori seats. Yeah.
Definitely, I think so, yeah. I think he's a good foil for Jacinda in terms of the relentless positivity. We saw him have a little snap on Q&A, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think there's a group of Labour supporters that will like to see him calling a spade a spade. He's an interesting guy because the first couple of times he ran for Parliament, he was one of those guys that almost came across as sort of rote-learned in terms of party policy and pushing the party line. And then, of course, in 2011, I think it was, he slipped out the back door. He got a really low list placing. And he kind of reinvented himself on Twitter almost as this really irreverent, punchy,
a bit devil may care as well.
Yeah, a little bit devil may care, and he's managed to maintain that when he got back in 2014 when Shane Jones left and he inherited his spot on the list. I think Calvin will appeal to, obviously, Māori, but importantly to perhaps more rural, provincial kind of New Zealanders. But certainly in terms of the Māori seats, this strategically was a very good move for Labour because, as I said last time, the narrative for a long time has been that Labour disempowers Māori. Māori is still not over the foreshore and seabed, despite winning back 6 of the 7 Māori seats. Māori weren't given great list places. They've never had a Māori in leadership. So I think his promotion is deserved, but it's also strategically very good in terms of enhancing the mana of their Māori candidates in the Māori seats. And I think, again, it will, probably be hurt hone. Calvin's come up with the line, quality, not quantity, and I think that's going to resonate with people. It's funny. But I do think that Hone will really struggle to get back into Parliament now, despite that deal with the Māori Party. And I think too, in terms of the Māori Party's other seats, they will have more of a fight on their hands than what they perhaps did before.
You can imagine, can't you, Kelvin Davis going around Waiariki with Tamati coffee and maybe even Jacinda Ardern for a splash of further celebrity, political celebrity, wandering around Waiariki, and Teodoro Flavel's seat, which is essential for the Māori Party because they're not going to get 5% of the vote to get over the threshold. That it could be a wipeout. Do you reckon, Ben? He's making a I'm not sure face.
Labour's been putting out what I think some pretty questionable poll results about Waiariki. I don't think that's a threat. I think in terms of the party vote, and I think in terms of shoring up seats where they are more marginal, Tamaki Makaurau, Te Tai Tokerau itself, and Te Tai Hauuru, I think this will really help Labour. They have had a perception, entirely fairly, in my opinion, that they do throw Māori under the bus, that they do take their Māori MPs for granted. And actually what we've seen over the past week is that there was quite a lot of old white man flab that you could cut out of Labour without really losing anything.
And it was interesting to hear Jacinda say on the hui in the weekend that Labour needed to learn the lessons of foreshore and seabed. That's a very refreshing kōrero that we haven't heard a lot of from Labour, so that will resonate with a lot of people.
Plus the guy who was questioning whether or not the Māori Party were kaupapa Māori not that long ago. Those seem like they could be, they could kind of reverberate a bit around those seats.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the National Party, who remain the biggest party in New Zealand. Paula Bennett, the deputy leader, was on the television on the weekend on The Nation and asked about Jacinda Ardern and mentioned, I think her line was that New Zealand wants someone who's got the brains and the substance. And then Lisa Rowan interjected, are you saying that Jacinda Ardern doesn't have the substance? She said, no. I'm just saying that Bill... And of course that was immediately turned into a headline about whether or not Jacinda had the brain. And that I mean, I think Paula Bennett was trying to avoid getting into that, but there is a big appetite in the media, and there will for all that stuff. The kind of radar is on high for anything that can be perceived as an attack on Jacinda Ardern that is ageist or sexist.
So that News Hub story initially had the headline, Ardern lacks brain.
That's right.
To be Prime Minister.
To unite
New Zealand.
And I suspect someone made a few calls.
By the time I clicked on the link through to it, the headline had been changed.
It was an unfair headline.
It was.
I don't know how it was changed, but if I was working for Paula Bennett, I would have been on that.
I would imagine there would have been a number of extremely urgent and very forceful calls, because National is exerting huge force of will,
super alert,
to try not to.
They've tied their hands behind their backs.
Yeah, they kind of floated a test balloon up when Jacinda Ardern became deputy
in the form of Nikki Kay.
Where Nikki Kay, who, to her credit, had beat Jacinda twice in Auckland Central, was a minister before her, has had a very good parliamentary career, took a few swipes at Jacinda, on matters that are actually pretty fair, lack of achievement, failing to make hits in opposition. None of this was incorrect. And she got slammed by the media, absolutely destroyed. There was a massive backlash, far, I think, probably in excess of what you'd expect from, it was just a general debate speech in the House, and those things usually are a bit like an unfunny comedy roast because it's MPs we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I think National got the picture from that was not the way to go with Jacinda. They've been basically walking on eggshells for the last 10 days, and as we said earlier, the only attacks that they've made have been at the shambles in the Green Party and the chances of making a stable coalition on the left.
And the other issue for National, just to sort of wind this up, and which maybe something, maybe nothing, is all the texts. But given the way things are going, surely Bill English's head will be called for. Well, Winston's already called for it. These texts, there are 500 and something.
450?
450 texts.
Let's not exaggerate. Let's not go crazy. Only 450 texts.
29 the day of and 26 the day after.
There's texts at 1 a.m. There's texts everywhere. You can't move for the fucking texts. And these texts are between Bill English and Glenys Dixon, what's she the kind of head of chief of staff, Clutha Southland.
She was the electorate agent
in the Gore office,
who was allegedly secretly recorded by Todd Barclay.
Yes.
And reached an employment settlement with him, and is involved in the investigation into Todd Barclay for alleged secret taping.
And the problem for Bill English is that he is on the record as saying he wasn't up to speed with what was going on with those negotiations. But there is evidence, because Winston Peters has the metadata of this, that a whole bunch of texts were exchanged around that time. I mean, Bill English is not going to talk about it because there's a police investigation reopened, but it does seem fishy.
Look, it was his first term not being the MP for Clutha Southland. He probably wanted updates on the local lamb and calf show.
It was probably just like emojis, like sad crying face, question mark, and then come back with like neutral face, and then
I think they were
like
watching like there was about True Detective 2, which was screening. It's like, what's going on here?
I mean,
I don't know. This is nowhere near as good as the first series.
Slightly more seriously, in terms of an echo of other reporting around this sort of case, in terms of Todd Barclay himself, the sort of sex and drugs innuendo. I think that the media seems to have gone a little bit out of its way to try and make this seem salacious.
Do you?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I think they might have erred on that side.
What do you mean? But is that with the reference to it being 1 o'clock in the morning?
Which I think is about a 0% chance of being
a normal working hour for a politician. It's true.
For Bill, Bill's a dairy farmer.
It might have been like pineapple rings or pineapple chunks, and she's like, no, pineapple chunks, Bill.
It's texting everyone asking.
Yeah, spaghetti with sausages, no, Bill, just the plain can of spaghetti.
I need to get the post up.
Interestingly, the Labour Party announced this morning that Jacinda Ardern announced that they wouldn't be asking questions in the House of Bill English on the subject. And I think they said they were just going to steer clear of it, which is kind of interesting moral high ground sort of stance.
Pretty relentlessly positive.
Relentlessly positively certain that Winston Peters will pick up the slack. Really? We've got heaps more that we could talk about, and we're going to be back talking about it very soon. All that's left to say, I think, is a formal apology from all of us to Francis Cook of NZME, whose cat was alarmed by the siren noise at the start of the last emergency podcast. We apologise to the cat. It might have even been more than one cat, but however many cats it was, we would like to offer our formal and heartfelt apologies. It won't happen again. Thanks to Simplicity. Thanks to Ben Thomas. Thanks to Annabelle Lee. Whole lot of first names there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks to Alex, who's on the decks today.
Alex, you're still awake. Well done.
Kia
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.